The first snowflake that landed on Beatrice Everton's outstretched palm might as well have been a death sentence, and she knew it the moment the bitter wind carried a dozen more through the gaps in her cabin walls. She stood in the doorway of the ramshackle structure she called home on the outskirts of Linden, Wyoming, watching the November sky darken with the promise of a merciless winter, her stomach already hollow from 3 days of nothing but melted snow and the memory of bread. The town had made its position clear when the general store owner refused her credit last week, when the banker foreclosed on her late father's claim, when the Reverend's wife crossed the street rather than acknowledge her existence. Beatrice was 22 years old, alone in a territory that had no patience for single women without family or fortune, and the approaching storm cared nothing for her circumstances. She closed the warped door as best she could, but the frame had shifted over the summer, and cold air whistled through the gaps no matter how she wedged the latch. Her father had died 6 months ago, thrown from a spooked horse during a routine ride to check fence lines. The fall had broken his neck, the doctors said. Death came quick and painless. For Beatrice, the pain had only just begun. Without her father's labor, the small ranch they had been building fell into disrepair. The 3 horses they owned were sold to pay for the burial. The cattle wandered off or were stolen. The property itself, never properly registered in her name, was seized by the bank under some legal mechanism she did not fully understand, but lacked the resources to fight. The cabin she now occupied was not even theirs, technically. It was an abandoned prospector's shack her father had found years ago, a backup shelter they sometimes used during harsh weather when working the far pastures. Now it was all she had. One room, perhaps 12 feet square, with a stone fireplace that drew smoke poorly and a roof that leaked in 2 corners. She had dragged her father's old mattress here, along with a trunk of clothes, a few pots, and little else. Everything else had been claimed by creditors or neighbors who came calling with sympathetic faces and opportunistic hands. Linden had not always been cruel to her. When her father was alive and productive, when they brought cattle to market and paid their bills, the town was civil enough. But a woman alone was a different matter entirely. The respectable families worried she would set her sights on their sons or husbands. The merchants worried she could not pay. The gossips whispered about why a girl her age was not yet married, inventing scandalous reasons that bore no resemblance to truth. The simple reality was that her father had been protective, and she had been content helping him build their dream rather than courting the rough men who passed through the territory. Now that choice, innocent as it had been, left her completely isolated. She had tried to find work. The hotel owner said he had no positions available, though she saw him hire a drifter for kitchen work the very next day. The seamstress claimed business was too slow, despite the pile of mending visible on her table. The schoolteacher position went to a woman from Pennsylvania with proper credentials. Never mind that Beatrice could read, write, and cipher better than most. Even the saloon owner who employed girls for services Beatrice would never consider turned her away with a laugh, saying she looked too hungry to be appealing. That word, hungry. It had become her constant companion, the gnawing in her belly that woke her at night. The weakness in her limbs when she tried to gather wood. The way her dresses hung loose where they once fit properly. She had been rationing a sack of cornmeal for 3 weeks, making it last by mixing smaller and smaller amounts with water to create a thin gruel. Yesterday she scraped the last of it from the bottom of the sack. This morning she boiled pine needles because someone once told her father they had some nutritional value. The result was a bitter tea that did nothing to ease the emptiness. Now the snow was beginning in earnest. She had perhaps 2 days of firewood stacked beside the cabin, gathered painstakingly over the past weeks from dead branches she could break without an axe, which had been sold with everything else. After that, she would have to choose between freezing and burning the few pieces of furniture she possessed. Neither option led anywhere good. Winter in Wyoming could last 5 months. She would not survive even one on pine needle tea and hope. Beatrice sank onto the edge of her mattress and pulled her father's old coat tighter around her shoulders. It still smelled faintly of him, tobacco and leather and honest sweat. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying solved nothing. She had learned that in the days after his death, when she wept until her throat was raw and woke to find the world exactly as terrible as before. Better to save her energy, thin as it was. The wind picked up as darkness fell, howling around the cabin like something alive and angry. Snow began to accumulate on the windowsill, visible in the fading light. She had no candles left, so when night came it would be complete. She lay down fully clothed, pulling her single thin blanket over herself and tucking her hands into her armpits for warmth. Sleep was difficult on an empty stomach, but eventually exhaustion won. She woke to the sound of footsteps crunching through snow. For a moment she thought she was dreaming, but the sound came again, deliberate and steady, approaching the cabin. Her heart hammered against her ribs. There were no neighbors within a mile, and visitors at this hour meant nothing good. She sat up slowly, eyes fixed on the door, wishing desperately for a weapon. Her father's rifle had been sold months ago. The footsteps stopped just outside. Then came a heavy thud and another, and another. Not the sound of someone trying to break in, something being set down, stacked. After a minute, the footsteps retreated, crunching away through the snow in the direction they had come. Beatrice waited, breathing shallowly, straining to hear any other sound. Nothing, just the wind. When she finally worked up the courage to crack open the door, pink dawn light was breaking over the mountains, and at least 2 cords of split firewood were stacked neatly against the cabin wall where none had been the night before. Good, dry wood, the kind that burned clean and hot. She stared at it in disbelief, then looked around for any sign of who had brought it. Fresh snow was already filling in the boot prints leading away, but she could see they headed west, toward the main road into Linden. She brought an armful of wood inside with shaking hands and built up the fire, crouching before it as warmth began to fill the cabin for the first time in weeks. Someone knew she was here. Someone had helped her. But who? And why? The answer came the next morning. She woke to the sound of footsteps again, earlier this time, just after dawn. When she opened the door, a tall figure was walking away, but this time she caught a glimpse of him before he disappeared into the trees. A man in a heavy coat and wide-brimmed hat, broad-shouldered, moving with an easy stride despite the snow. And beside the firewood, which he had replenished, sat a canvas sack. Inside she found potatoes, onions, a small sack of flour, salt, dried beans, and a precious paper-wrapped package of bacon. Enough food for a week, maybe more if she was careful. Her hands trembled as she clutched the sack. This was more than charity. This was salvation. She called out, hoping he was still within earshot. "Wait, please. Who are you?" The figure paused at the tree line, perhaps 50 yards away. For a long moment he stood there, then he turned slightly, not quite facing her. "Name is Lucas Brennan." His voice carried clearly through the cold air, a deep, quiet drawl. "You are needing help." "I cannot pay you," she said, hating the words even as they were necessary. "I have nothing." "I am not asking for payment." He adjusted his hat. "I will provide everything, just take what I bring." "Why?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "Why would you help me?" There was a long pause. "Because no one else will." Then he was gone, walking into the tree line and vanishing among the pines. Beatrice stood in the snow in her bare feet, cold forgotten, staring after him. Lucas Brennan. She turned the name over in her mind. She had heard it before, she thought, but could not place where. There were so many people in Linden and the surrounding ranches, most of whom she knew only by sight from church services. She no longer attended. She brought the food inside and sat on the floor beside the fire, looking at the supplies as if they might vanish. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she forced herself to be methodical. She started with a simple pan bread, mixing flour with water and salt, cooking it on her small iron skillet. The smell alone made her dizzy. When it was done, she ate slowly, forcing herself not to devour it all at once. Then she boiled potatoes with a precious piece of the bacon for flavor, and ate until the gnawing hunger finally retreated. With her belly full for the first time in weeks, warmth from the fire soaking into her bones, Beatrice felt almost human again. But questions circled her mind like wolves. Who was Lucas Brennan? Why was he helping her? And how long could she accept charity from a stranger before it became something she could never repay? The answer to the first question came 3 days later when she finally ventured into town, needing to understand who her mysterious benefactor was. The snow had stopped and the road was passable, though the walk left her breathless and shaking. She was still weak, her body recovering slowly from weeks of starvation. But curiosity and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope, drove her forward. She found Mrs. Chen, the Chinese laundry owner, one of the few people in Linden who had never been openly cruel. The woman looked up from her washing with surprise when Beatrice entered. "Miss Everton, I had heard you left the territory." "Heard from whom?" Mrs. Chen looked uncomfortable. "People talk. They said you had gone east to family." "I have no family." Beatrice kept her voice level. "I am still here in the old prospector cabin past Miller's Creek." The older woman nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. She knew what it meant that Beatrice was there, what the town had done by turning its back. "What can I do for you?" "I need to know about someone." "Lucas Brennan." "Who is he?" Recognition flickered across Mrs. Chen's face. "The Brennan Ranch is north of town, up in the high country. Big operation, cattle and horses. Old family, been here since the early days. Lucas is the youngest son. Tell me about him." Mrs. Chen set down her washing. There were 3 Brennan boys. The oldest 2 were loud, always in town, drinking and gambling and making noise. Lucas was different. Quiet. Serious. Their father died when Lucas was about 16, left the ranch to all 3 boys together. The older ones ran it into the ground with bad decisions and worse habits. 5 years back, the oldest was killed in a gunfight in Cheyenne, something about a card game. The middle brother drank himself to death 2 years later, left Lucas with a failing ranch and a mountain of debt. And he fixed it. Worked himself near to death, they say. Sold off land he did not need, focused on quality stock instead of quantity. Paid every debt in full. Now the Brennan Ranch is one of the most prosperous in the county. Lucas runs it alone, lives alone, keeps to himself. How old is he? 26, maybe 27. Hard to say exactly. Mrs. Chen picked up her washing again. "Why are you asking?" Beatrice hesitated. "He has been bringing me firewood and food. I do not understand why." The older woman's expression softened. "Lucas Brennan is a good man. If he is helping you, it is because he has a good heart. That is all." But Beatrice suspected there was more to it than that. Men did not provide for women out of pure altruism, not in her experience. There was always an expectation, spoken or unspoken. Yet Lucas had asked for nothing, had barely even spoken to her. She walked back to her cabin confused and wary, but also curious in a way she had not felt about another person in a very long time. He came again 2 days later. This time she was ready, watching from the window when she heard his horse approaching. He rode a sturdy bay gelding, sitting easy in the saddle despite the cold. He dismounted, unloaded supplies from his saddlebags, and stacked them beside her door with the same quiet efficiency as before. Beatrice stepped outside before he could leave. He looked up, and for the first time she got a clear look at his face. Lean and weathered, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of beard growth. Dark hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and his eyes were a surprising light brown, almost amber in the morning sun. Not handsome in a conventional way, but striking. There was a steadiness to him, a calm that made her instinctively trust him even as her mind counseled caution. "Mr. Brennan," she said. He straightened, one hand resting on his saddle. "Miss Everton, I asked about you in town. Figured you might. They say you have your own ranch to run. You should not be wasting resources on me." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "Not a waste. Then what is it? Why are you doing this?" He took his time answering, as if weighing each word. "Passed by your cabin few weeks back. Saw you trying to break branches for firewood. Could see you were struggling. Went into town, heard talk about you. How your father died, how you lost everything. Heard how people turned their backs." His jaw tightened slightly. "I know what that feels like." "Because of your brothers," he nodded once. "They left me with a mess and a reputation. Took years to prove I was not like them. People were not kind while I was doing it. So this is sympathy. This is one person helping another." He met her eyes directly. "You did nothing wrong, Miss Everton. You are suffering because of circumstances beyond your control and people's cruelty. I have the means to help. Why would I not?" Beatrice felt something loosen in her chest, some tight knot of fear and suspicion she had been carrying. "I still cannot pay you, I know. So I will owe you." "No." His voice was firm. "You owe me nothing. What I bring, I give freely. If you want me to stop coming, I will stop, but there will be no debt between us." She studied him, this quiet cowboy who seemed to want nothing from her but the chance to help. It went against everything she had learned about men and their motives, everything the town had taught her about the world. Yet his eyes were steady and honest, and she found herself believing him. "I do not want you to stop coming," she said quietly. The corner of his mouth lifted just barely. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then I will keep coming." He brought her fresh meat the next time, a portion of venison from a deer he had shot, then coffee, sugar, canned peaches. He repaired the gap in her door frame without being asked, arriving one morning with tools and spending an hour fitting the wood properly. He patched the leaks in her roof. He brought her a stack of old newspapers for insulation and kindling. Each visit was brief, his manner quiet and unassuming, but the impact on her life was profound. With adequate food and warmth, Beatrice began to recover. Color returned to her cheeks, strength returned to her limbs. The constant anxiety that had been her companion began to ease. She found herself waiting for his visits, looking forward to them in a way that had nothing to do with the supplies he brought. She learned that he came every 3 or 4 days, usually early in the morning. She began to time her own schedule around his arrivals, making sure she was presentable, that the cabin was tidy. She told herself it was simple courtesy, but she knew it was more than that. One morning in December, he arrived to find her outside attempting to saw wood from a fallen branch, using a dull handsaw that had been left in the cabin. She was making little progress, breathing hard, her hands red from cold and effort. He dismounted and walked over without a word, taking the saw from her hands. "You will hurt yourself with that blade. It is all I have." He examined the saw, testing the edge with his thumb. "Needs sharpening. I will bring you a better one. You have given me enough already." He looked at her then, really looked at her in a way that made her breath catch. Not nearly enough. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning she was afraid to examine too closely. He went back to his horse and pulled out a proper saw from his pack, then spent the next hour cutting the fallen branch into manageable pieces while she watched, too aware of the flex of his shoulders through his coat, the capable way he handled the tool, the quiet concentration on his face. When he was done and the wood was stacked, she gathered her courage. "Would you like coffee? I have some now, thanks to you." He hesitated and she thought he would refuse. He always refused, always left quickly after completing his tasks. But this time he nodded. That would be nice. Her cabin suddenly felt very small with him inside it. He stood near the fire while she made the coffee, too polite to sit without being invited, his hat in his hands. She poured 2 cups and handed him one, then sat on her mattress, the only real seating available. After a moment, he lowered himself onto the wooden trunk, maintaining a respectful distance. They drank in silence at first. Then Beatrice said, "Mrs. Chen told me how you saved your family ranch. That must have been very difficult." "It was necessary." "Still, you were young and alone." "Not much choice in the matter." He took a sip of coffee. "Ranch was all I had. If I lost it, I would have been in the same position as you. Nowhere to go, no one to help. I was not going to let that happen." "Did people help you?" "A few. Old ranch hands who had known my father. They stayed on for reduced wages until I could afford to pay them properly. One banker who was willing to give me a chance when others would not. Mostly I helped myself." "That is what I should be doing." The words came out more bitter than she intended. "Helping myself instead of relying on your charity, Beatrice." It was the first time he had used her given name. "There is no shame in accepting help when you need it, and you do need it. Winter here will kill you if you try to face it alone. I hate being helpless." "You are not helpless. You have survived for months in conditions that would have broken most people. You are still here, still fighting. That takes strength." His words warmed her more than the coffee. No one had acknowledged what she had been through, the sheer will it had taken to keep going. She blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you for saying that, for all of this. You are welcome." He finished his coffee and stood to leave. At the door he paused. "Storm coming tomorrow, big one. I will be by after it passes to make sure you are all right. Keep the fire going, stay inside." "I will." He settled his hat back on his head. "Beatrice, you are not alone anymore. Remember that." Then he was gone, riding back into the cold, leaving her with a full woodpile, a stocked larder, and a heart that was starting to feel dangerously full as well. The storm he predicted was indeed fierce, dumping 3 feet of snow over 2 days and nights. Beatrice stayed inside as instructed, keeping the fire burning, rationing her supplies carefully even though she had plenty. Old habits died hard. She thought about Lucas constantly during those long hours. The quiet care in his actions, the steadiness of his presence, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, with something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. She was falling for him. The realization came one evening as she sat by the fire, and it terrified her. She had nothing to offer a man like Lucas Brennan. No property, no dowry, no family connections. She was a burden he had taken on out of kindness, nothing more. To imagine anything else was to invite heartbreak. But her heart, it seemed, was not interested in logic. When he came 3 days later, she had worked herself into a state of forced casualness, determined not to reveal her feelings. He arrived mid-morning, riding through snow that came up to his horse's knees, and began digging out the path to her door before even greeting her. She watched from the window, then impulsively put on her coat and went out to help. "You should stay inside where it is warm," he said. "I can help." They worked together in companionable silence, clearing a path to the woodpile and then to the small structure that served as an outhouse. The physical labor felt good, and the simple cooperation of it felt even better. When they were done, both breathing hard from the exertion, he looked at her with approval. "You are getting stronger. I am eating regularly thanks to you. It suits you, the color in your cheeks." The compliment was so unexpected and so clearly genuine that she felt herself blush, which only deepened the color he had just praised. He noticed, and this time he did smile, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "Come inside," she said quickly. "Warm up before you ride back." This time when he entered her cabin, the atmosphere felt different, charged somehow. She made coffee again, her hands not quite steady, and when she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed. The contact was brief but electric. His eyes met hers and held. Neither of them moved. "Beatrice," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "What? When I first started helping you, it was because I saw someone in need and I could not walk away, but it has become more than that. These visits, they are the best part of my days. Seeing you, talking with you, knowing you are safe and fed, I think about you constantly. I have for weeks now." She could barely breathe. "Lucas, I have nothing. I cannot offer you anything. You do not understand." He set down his coffee cup and took a careful step closer. "I do not want your property or your money. I want your company, your conversation, your smile on the rare occasions when you let yourself smile. I want to know everything about you. What you think, what you dream about, what makes you laugh. I want to be the person who takes care of you, not out of obligation, but because it would be my greatest privilege. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. Let me court you properly. Court me." The words came out strangled. "Lucas, look at where I live, what I am. I am a charity case, living in a prospector's shack. You are a woman who has shown incredible strength in the face of tremendous hardship. You are intelligent, capable, and beautiful. The circumstances that brought you here are not your fault, and they do not define your worth. The town does not see it that way. I do not care what the town thinks." His voice was firm. "I stopped caring about that years ago. The question is what you think, what you feel. Because if I have been reading this wrong, if you do not feel anything for me, tell me now and I will go back to just helping as a friend. But if there is any chance that you might feel the same way I do, I want to pursue that." Beatrice felt tears welling up, but this time they were not from sadness. "I feel the same way. I have tried not to, tried to be sensible about it, but I cannot stop thinking about you either. You have been so kind to me, so generous, and I am terrified that I am going to disappoint you somehow." He closed the remaining distance between them, reaching up to gently brush a tear from her cheek. His hand was warm and calloused, careful. "You could never disappoint me. You do not know that. I know enough." His thumb traced along her cheekbone. "I know that you are brave and stubborn and too proud for your own good sometimes. I know that you have a sharp mind and a generous heart. I know that when you smile, which is not often enough, it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And I know that I want to spend my time getting to know everything else." She leaned into his touch, letting herself have this moment of connection, of being cared for. "What do we do now? Now I court you properly. I come to visit regularly, not just to bring supplies, but to spend time with you. We talk, we get to know each other. When the weather improves, maybe you will let me take you to dinner in town, let everyone see that you are under my protection. That will cause talk. Let them talk," he smiled. "I am a wealthy rancher. You will be amazed how quickly people change their tune when there is a powerful man vouching for you. It is hypocritical and wrong, but we can use it to your advantage. I do not want to use you. You are not. We are helping each other. You give me something I have not had in years, Beatrice. Hope, happiness. A reason to look forward instead of just working constantly. That is worth more than firewood and flour. She reached up and covered his hand with her own, holding it against her face. Then yes, court me. Let us see where this goes. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed his lips gently to her forehead. It was chaste and sweet and somehow more intimate than if he had kissed her mouth. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of him, leather and pine and cold air. When he finally left that day, riding back toward his ranch through the snow, Beatrice stood in the doorway watching until he disappeared from sight. Then she went inside and allowed herself to laugh, pure and joyful, for the first time in months. Lucas was true to his word. He came regularly, now openly courting her. He brought her small gifts along with practical supplies, a book of poetry, a pair of warm gloves, a jar of honey. They sat by her fire and talked for hours. She learned about his childhood, about the weight of trying to live up to his father's legacy while his brothers destroyed it. He learned about her life before her father's death, about her dreams of traveling, of seeing the ocean, of having a real home again. One afternoon in January, nearly 2 months after he first left firewood at her door, he arrived with a wagon instead of his horse. In the back was a new stove, compact but well made, far superior to the smoky fireplace she had been using. "Lucas, this is too much. It is practical. You need a better way to cook and heat this place." He began unloading it with the help of a ranch hand he had brought along. "Besides, I have selfish reasons. If you have a better stove, you can cook me dinner sometimes." She laughed. "I see, this is really for your benefit." "Absolutely." They installed the stove, venting it through the roof. The difference it made was immediate and profound. The cabin became truly warm for the first time, the heat even and steady. That evening, Beatrice made a proper meal: pan-fried steaks from beef Lucas had brought, along with potatoes and carrots roasted in the oven, biscuits with butter and honey. They ate sitting on the floor, plates balanced on their laps, and it felt like a feast. "I have not cooked a real meal in so long," she said. "I forgot how much I enjoy it. You are good at it." "My mother taught me before she died. I was only 10, but I remember her lessons." "Tell me about her." So she did, sharing memories she had kept locked away for years. Her mother's laugh, her skill with a needle, the way she sang while working. The pain of losing her to fever. The years after, when it had been just Beatrice and her father, learning to manage without her. Lucas listened with complete attention, asking questions, sharing his own memories of losing his father. Their grief became a bridge between them, a shared understanding of loss and survival. As winter deepened, their relationship did too. Lucas spent more and more time at her cabin, arriving early in the morning and often staying until dusk. He brought his own projects to work on, repairing tack or mending tools, while she sewed or read aloud. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, the companionship enough. Other times they talked about everything and nothing. The books they had read, the places they wanted to see, their opinions on politics and religion, and whether the new railroad would be good or bad for the territory. He kissed her for the first time in February, on a clear cold day when the sun was bright on the snow. They had gone outside to enjoy the weather, walking the cleared paths around the cabin. She slipped on a patch of ice and he caught her, his arms strong around her waist. Instead of letting go, he pulled her closer. "May I?" he asked, his breath fogging in the cold air. She nodded, words beyond her. He lowered his head and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper when she responded. His lips were warm despite the cold, and she felt the kiss down to her toes. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "I have been wanting you to." They kissed again, then went back inside where it was warm and spent the afternoon in each other's arms, talking and kissing and making plans. Lucas wanted her to move to his ranch, but not in a way that would cause scandal. "Marry me," he said, the words sudden but sure. "I know it has only been a few months, but I know my own mind. I love you, Beatrice. I want you as my wife." Her heart soared, but practicality reared its head. "Your neighbors, your business associates, they will say I am a gold digger, that I trapped you. Let them say what they want. Anyone who matters will see the truth. And the rest, well, they will come around when they see how happy we are." He took her hand. "Besides, I have a plan. There is a lawyer in Cheyenne I trust. We can register your father's original claim in your name, retroactively. It may not hold up in court against the bank, but it will give you legal standing, make you a property owner on paper. Takes away their ammunition about you being destitute." "Can that actually work?" "It can if the lawyer is good and the paperwork is filed correctly, which it will be. I will pay for it." He held up a hand before she could protest. "Consider it a wedding gift. I want to start our marriage with you having some independence and security. Not because I do not trust you, but because I know it matters to you." She was crying again, but this time from overwhelming gratitude and love. "How are you real? How did I get this lucky? I am the lucky one." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "So, is that a yes?" "Yes. Absolutely yes." They married in March, in the small church in Linden. Lucas invited everyone who mattered to him, and the church was surprisingly full. Ranchers he did business with, ranch hands from his outfit, Mrs. Chen, and a few other townspeople who had remained neutral during Beatrice's troubles. The Reverend's wife, who had crossed the street to avoid Beatrice months earlier, was conspicuously not invited. Beatrice wore a dress that Lucas insisted on buying for her, simple but beautiful, blue wool that brought out her eyes. The ceremony was short but heartfelt. When Lucas slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, Beatrice felt a door closing on the worst period of her life and another opening on something bright and new. They held a reception at the hotel, a meal and dancing that went late into the evening. Beatrice watched her new husband moving through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, and marveled that this was her life now. That night, he brought her to his ranch for the first time as his wife. The house was larger than she expected, a solid 2-story structure built from good timber, with glass windows and a wraparound porch. Inside was furnished simply but comfortably. Lucas had clearly prepared for her arrival, with fresh curtains in the windows and wildflowers in a vase on the kitchen table. "It needs a woman's touch," he said, almost shyly. "I have been batching it for years. You can change anything you like. It is perfect." She turned to him, this man who had saved her life and then given her a new one. "You are perfect. Far from it, but I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you." He carried her up the stairs to the bedroom, and there in the lamplight they came together with tenderness and passion, sealing their vows in the oldest way. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Beatrice felt a peace she had not known since before her father's death. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. The first months of marriage were an adjustment, but a joyful one. Beatrice threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, sewing new curtains, planting a kitchen garden as soon as the ground thawed, learning the rhythms of ranch life. Lucas taught her to ride properly, gave her a gentle mare of her own. She learned to help with the account books, discovering she had a head for numbers that proved invaluable. Together they made decisions about the ranch, true partners in every sense. The town's attitude toward her changed dramatically once she was Mrs. Lucas Brennan. Suddenly, the same merchants who had turned her away were deferential and eager for her business. The same women who had gossiped about her now invited her to their social gatherings. It was infuriating and vindicating in equal measure. At first, Beatrice wanted nothing to do with them, but Lucas counseled a measured approach. "Be polite, but do not forget," he said. "You do not owe them your friendship, but for business purposes it is better to be civil. Besides, the best revenge is living well." So she attended the church socials and the ladies' aid meetings, always gracious, never mentioning the past. But she did not forget. And she made it a point to befriend the other outsiders and struggling families, making sure that what had happened to her did not happen to anyone else if she could prevent it. She organized food drives for families in need. And when Lucas built a new barn, he quietly hired men who were down on their luck, giving them a chance to get back on their feet. Summer came, and with it, the hard work of ranching. Beatrice learned to help with tasks beyond the house, riding fence lines with Lucas, helping with branding, even assisting with difficult births in the livestock. She was not naturally suited to ranch work, but she was determined, and Lucas was patient. She loved being part of the operation, loved the satisfaction of a good day's work and the quiet pride in Lucas's eyes when she mastered a new skill. They talked about children that first summer, lying in bed after long days, windows open to catch the breeze. Lucas wanted a family but was in no rush. "I just got you to myself. I am in no hurry to share." But Beatrice could see the hope in his eyes when he watched other people's children, and she knew he would be a wonderful father. By autumn, she was pregnant. The realization came with a mix of joy and terror. Her own mother had died of fever, not childbirth, but Beatrice was acutely aware of how dangerous bearing children could be, especially out here far from doctors. Lucas was overjoyed and immediately overprotective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. She had to physically restrain him from hiring help for every small task. "I am pregnant, not dying," she said, exasperated. "Women have been doing ranch work while expecting babies since the beginning of time. Not my wife, not if I can help it. Lucas Brennan, I love you, but if you do not let me live my normal life, I will go mad. The doctor said exercise is good for me. I am not doing anything dangerous." They compromised. She could do lighter work, but had to promise to rest when tired and let the ranch hands handle anything strenuous. It chafed sometimes, but mostly she was touched by his concern. This man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer continued to exceed her expectations every day. The baby came in May, a month after their first anniversary. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Beatrice was certain she would not survive it, but Lucas stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to leave even when the midwife suggested he might be more comfortable elsewhere. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, Lucas wept openly. "We have a son," he said, awed. "Beatrice, we have a son." They named him Michael after Lucas's father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong-lunged. Beatrice recovered slowly from the birth, and for a few weeks, she was grateful for Lucas's overprotectiveness. He hired a woman from town to help with housework, so Beatrice could focus on healing and the baby. He rocked Michael at night so she could sleep, brought her meals in bed, and treated her like she was made of spun glass. "I almost lost you," he said one night, the baby sleeping peacefully in the cradle Lucas had built. "When the labor went on so long, when you were in so much pain, I thought I might lose you. I have never been so scared in my life. But you did not lose me. I am here, we are both here." She reached for his hand. "Lucas, I need you to understand something. That winter before you found me, I was ready to die. Not by choice, but I had accepted it was coming. I had given up. Then you appeared and gave me everything, Food, warmth, safety, love, a future. You gave me this life. I am not going anywhere. He kissed her then, softly, reverently. I did not give you anything you did not earn. You survived because you are strong. I just helped a little. You helped more than a little. As Michael grew, the ranch prospered. Lucas made smart decisions about breeding stock and investments. Beatrice's contribution to the bookkeeping and household management freed him to focus on the outdoor work he did best. They made a formidable team, respected throughout the region. Invitations to dinners and events came regularly, and they were often consulted on community matters. But success did not change them. Lucas remained the quiet, steady man she had fallen in love with, more comfortable with horses than people, happiest at home with his family. Beatrice never forgot where she had come from, the desperation and fear of that terrible winter. She kept the old prospector's cabin in good repair, using it as a line shack for ranch hands, but also as a reminder. On difficult days, when problems seemed overwhelming, she would ride out there and stand in the small space where Lucas had saved her life, and remember that they could overcome anything. Their daughter arrived 2 years after Michael, an easy birth that left Lucas only marginally less terrified. They named her Helen, and she was her father's darling from the first moment, with his amber eyes and serious expression. Michael was a rambunctious toddler by then, into everything, and Lucas's days were filled with work and children, and the kind of chaos that comes with a growing family. He loved every minute. "Do you remember when you said you would provide everything?" Beatrice asked one evening, watching him play with the children on the floor, both of them climbing over him like he was a piece of furniture. "I do. You kept your promise. You provided everything and more than I could have dreamed." He looked up at her, children still attached. "You gave me everything too, a home, not just a house, a family, a reason to build something beyond just survival." As the children grew, so did the ranch. They added outbuildings, improved the stock, hired more hands. Lucas trained Michael in ranch work from an early age, patient with his son the same way he had been patient with Beatrice. Helen showed an early gift with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals. Watching them, Beatrice felt a contentment that went soul deep. But life was not without challenges. A drought in their 5th year of marriage tested them, and they had to make difficult decisions about which stock to sell and which to keep. A harsh winter 2 years later killed some of their cattle. There were injuries and illnesses, setbacks and disappointments. Through it all, they faced each challenge together, their partnership only strengthening with time. Michael was 6 and Helen 4 when Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first 2, and she was often tired and sick. Lucas wanted her to do nothing but rest, but with 2 active children and a ranch to help run, rest was a luxury. They hired more help, and Mrs. Chen's daughter came to stay for a few months to assist with the children. The baby, another boy they named Thomas, arrived safely, though the birth left Beatrice exhausted in a way the others had not. The doctor advised that another pregnancy would be dangerous, and she and Lucas made the decision that their family was complete. 3 healthy children, a prosperous ranch each other. It was more than enough. As the children grew into school age, they faced the question of education. Linden had a small school, but it was several miles away. Lucas suggested hiring a tutor to come to the ranch, but Beatrice felt it was important for the children to have the social experience of school. So each morning, one of the ranch hands would drive them to town in the wagon, returning them in the afternoon. Michael proved to be a bright student, quick with numbers like his mother. Helen was creative, always drawing or making up stories. Thomas was still too young for formal schooling, but he followed his siblings everywhere, determined to keep up. Watching them grow and learn, Beatrice felt the same wonder she had experienced at their births. These were her children, hers and Lucas's, tangible proof of the life they had built together. On their 10th anniversary, Lucas took her back to the old prospector's cabin. They had not been there together in years, though the ranch hands kept it maintained. It was spring, and wildflowers dotted the meadow around it. They stood outside, looking at the small structure that had been her whole world once. 10 years ago, I was starving and freezing in there, certain I would not survive the winter, Beatrice said. And now look at us. I remember the first time I saw you, Lucas said. You were trying to break branches for firewood, too proud to go into town and beg. I could see you were suffering, but you had this determination, this fire. I knew right then you were someone special. I was terrified of you at first. I thought you would want something from me, some repayment I could not give. I only wanted to help. Though I will admit, after that first conversation, I started wanting more. You were so fierce and smart and beautiful. I found excuses to visit more often than was strictly necessary. She laughed. I noticed. You brought me firewood nearly every other day at one point. I had more firewood than I could possibly use. I wanted to see you, make sure you were all right, make sure you knew you were not alone. She turned to face him fully. You saved my life, Lucas, not just from starvation or cold, but from despair. You gave me hope when I had none left. You gave me everything. We saved each other. He pulled her close. I was surviving before you, existing but not truly living. You brought joy and purpose into my life. You made the ranch a home. You gave me a family. Those are gifts beyond price. They kissed there in the spring sunshine in front of the cabin where their story had begun, and Beatrice felt the circle completing. From desperation to salvation, from loneliness to love, from survival to thriving. It had been a journey she never could have predicted, but one she would not change for anything. As they walked back to their horses for the ride home to their children and their life, Lucas took her hand. It was a simple gesture, one he had made thousands of times over their 10 years together, but it still made her heart flutter. This man, this quiet cowboy who had appeared in her darkest hour with firewood and a promise to provide everything, had kept that promise in ways large and small every day since. And she had given him everything in return: her love, her loyalty, her partnership, her whole heart. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Michael grew into a serious young man, dedicated to ranching like his father. At 16, he was already taking on significant responsibilities, managing parts of the operation with skill beyond his years. Lucas trusted him implicitly, and Beatrice saw so much of her husband in their son, the same quiet competence and steady reliability. Helen at 14 was turning into a beauty, with suitors already showing interest, much to Lucas's consternation. She had her mother's intelligence and her father's calm nature, along with a gift for music they discovered when a traveling teacher passed through and heard her sing. Lucas bought her a piano, hauled all the way from Cheyenne, and the house was often filled with her playing. She dreamed of attending a music conservatory back east, and though the thought of her leaving pained both parents, they were determined to support her ambitions. Thomas at 10 was the wild card, neither as serious as Michael nor as refined as Helen. He was adventurous and curious, always exploring, always asking questions. He wanted to be everything: a cowboy, a doctor, a railroad engineer, a teacher. Lucas said he would find his path in time and not to worry. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in Wyoming. Lucas's reputation for quality stock and fair dealing brought buyers from across the region. They had built a larger house, though Beatrice had insisted on keeping it homey rather than ostentatious. She had also insisted on building a proper cabin near the barn for any ranch hands who needed housing, remembering all too well what it was like to have nowhere to go. Over the years, several young men and even one young woman had found refuge working for the Brennans when life had dealt them hard blows. Lucas and Beatrice had an unspoken policy of giving people chances, offering fair wages and decent housing, asking only for honest work in return. More than one drifter had found stability on their ranch and gone on to build their own successful lives, and Beatrice took quiet pride in extending the same help to others that Lucas had once extended to her. On a cool evening in October, nearly 20 years after Lucas first brought firewood to a starving woman in a prospector's shack, Beatrice and Lucas sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. The children were inside, the sounds of Helen's piano and the boys' laughter drifting through the windows. The ranch was quiet in the way it only got at day's end, the work done and the cattle settled. You ever think about how different our lives could have been? Beatrice asked, her hand resting on Lucas's knee. Sometimes. If I had ridden a different route that day, if I had not stopped to check on you, if you had not accepted my help. I think about the town leaving me to starve, how easily I could have died in that cabin, how close I came. But you did not. You survived. We found each other, because of you, because you cared enough to help a stranger. He shook his head. I have told you before, I got as much from our meeting as you did, maybe more. You gave me purpose beyond just running a ranch. You gave me a reason to build something lasting. We built it together. Yes, together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Inside, the piano music stopped and was replaced by the sounds of the children preparing for bed. Their life, their family, their home. Built on a foundation of kindness and trust, of one person reaching out to another in desperate need, of love that had grown from compassion into something deep and unshakable. I love you, Beatrice said, not for the first time, but with the same sincerity as always. I love you too. More every day, somehow. More years passed. Michael married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county, a capable woman named Sarah who fit into their family seamlessly. They built a house on the edge of the ranch and began their own family, giving Lucas and Beatrice their first grandchildren, twin girls with their father's serious eyes and their mother's quick smiles. Helen did go east to study music, and though her absence left a hole in the household, her letters home were full of excitement about her studies and the world she was discovering. She eventually returned to Wyoming, unable to stay away from the mountains and the family she loved, and became a music teacher in Linden. She married a banker, a good man who appreciated her talents, and they split their time between town and the ranch. Thomas, after trying his hand at several pursuits, finally found his calling as a veterinarian. He studied with the local animal doctor and then attended a proper veterinary school, returning to establish a practice that served the ranches throughout the region. He remained unmarried, claiming he was too busy, though Beatrice suspected he simply had not met the right woman yet. Lucas and Beatrice grew older together, their hair graying, their faces weathering like the mountains they lived beneath. Lucas's shoulders, once so broad and strong, began to stoop slightly. Beatrice's hands, which had once been soft, were now work-worn and marked with age. But they moved through their days with the same partnership they had always shared, still finishing each other's sentences, still finding comfort in each other's presence. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was full of noise and laughter, 3 generations of family united. Michael and Sarah's twins were now grown women themselves, and their younger children ran through the house with the freedom of youth. Helen's two boys were musicians like their mother, and they played during the dinner, filling the air with beautiful sound. Thomas, still unmarried but devoted to his family, gave a toast that had everyone in tears. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that love is not just a feeling but an action, who showed us that strength comes in many forms, the strength to endure hardship, the strength to help others, the strength to build something lasting, who created a home that was always open, always welcoming, always filled with love." To Lucas and Beatrice, who found each other in the harshest winter and created an eternal spring. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house was quiet again, Lucas and Beatrice walked out to the old prospector's cabin one last time. They had kept it all these years, though it was rarely used anymore. It stood as a monument to where they had begun, a reminder of how far they had come. 30 years, Beatrice said, standing in front of the small structure that had once been her entire world. From this cabin to that house, from desperation to abundance, from loneliness to a family that fills multiple homes. From surviving to thriving, Lucas added. He moved a bit slower now, his body showing the years of hard ranch work, but his eyes were still the same amber that had captivated her decades ago. "From strangers to soulmates. You kept your promise," she said softly. "That day when you said you would provide everything. You did. You gave me more than I ever dreamed possible. We gave it to each other." He took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after 30 years. "You took the firewood and food I brought and turned them into a life. You took this rough cowboy who barely knew how to talk to people and made him into a husband, a father, a better man. I provided the tools, but you built the life. We built it together," she insisted, as she always did. "Yes, together." They stood there as darkness fell completely, the stars emerging bright and clear overhead. In the distance, lights glowed in the windows of their home, where their children and grandchildren were settling in for the night. A home built on love, on partnership, on the simple act of one person helping another when help was desperately needed. Lucas's health began to decline when he was 68. Nothing sudden, just the gradual wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. He could no longer ride all day or lift what he once had. Michael took over more of the ranch operations, and Lucas transitioned into an advisory role, though he still insisted on being involved in major decisions. Beatrice, 65 and still vigorous, fussed over him constantly, making sure he rested, that he ate properly, that he did not push himself too hard. "I survived that winter when I was starving," she told him when he protested her hovering. "You survived building this ranch from nothing. We have made it this far together. I am not losing you to stubbornness now." He smiled at her, the same smile that had melted her heart 3 decades ago. "Yes, madam." They spent their days together, often sitting on the porch watching the ranch operate without their constant involvement. It was strange at first, letting go, but also freeing. They had built something that would outlast them, something solid and good that their children would carry forward. That knowledge brought peace. On a warm summer evening, surrounded by family, Lucas Brennan passed away in his sleep. He was 72 years old, and he died in the house he had built, in the bed he had shared with his beloved wife for 40 years, his hand clasped in hers. Beatrice felt the moment he left, a shift in the air, a silence where his breathing had been. The grief was immediate and crushing, but beneath it ran a current of gratitude. They had been given 40 years together, 40 years of love and partnership and building a life. Many people never got even 1 year of what they had shared. The funeral was enormous. It seemed everyone in the county came to pay respects to Lucas Brennan, the quiet rancher who had been unfailingly fair and generous, who had helped countless people over the years, who had built an empire on integrity and hard work. Beatrice stood at the graveside, her children flanking her, and listened to the stories. So many people had tales of Lucas's kindness, his wisdom, his steady presence. But none of them knew the story she held closest. A cold winter morning, a load of firewood appearing like magic, a quiet voice saying, "I will provide everything." And he had, right up to the last moment. Beatrice lived another 15 years after Lucas's death, years filled with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She remained active in ranch operations, though she increasingly relied on Michael and Sarah. She found comfort in the routines she and Lucas had established, in the house they had built together, in the family they had created. She missed him constantly, achingly, but she also felt his presence everywhere, in the solid walls of their home, in the well-maintained fences and healthy cattle, in the values their children exemplified. She spent her last years telling their story to anyone who would listen. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren would gather around her chair on the porch, and she would tell them about the terrible winter when the town left her starving, about the quiet cowboy who appeared with firewood and a promise, about building a life from nothing but love and determination. She wanted them to understand that their family's prosperity had not come easily, that it was built on sacrifice and hard work and, most importantly, on caring for others. "Your grandfather saw someone in need and he helped," she would tell them. "He did not ask for anything in return. He just did what was right. That is the example he set, the legacy he left you. Treat people fairly. Help those who need help. Build something lasting. Love with your whole heart." Beatrice Brennan passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87, in the same bed where her husband had died 15 years earlier. Her children buried her beside Lucas, on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The funeral was as large as his had been, a testament to the impact she had made on the community. But the real testament was the ranch itself, still thriving, still operated by their children and grandchildren, still a place where people could find work and refuge and a second chance. Years later, the old prospector's cabin still stood, maintained by the family as a historical landmark. Michael's great-grandson, another Lucas Brennan, would take his own children there and tell them the story, about a winter that nearly killed their great-great-grandmother, about a cowboy who appeared with firewood and a promise, about love that transformed two lives and created a legacy that lived on generations later. The cabin was small and simple, just 4 walls and a roof, but it represented something far larger. It was the birthplace of their family, the place where everything began. It stood as a reminder that life could change in a moment, that one act of kindness could ripple forward through time, that love built on a foundation of respect and partnership could weather any storm. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled down from the mountains and snow piled high around the ranch, you could almost see them. A young woman standing in the doorway, hollow-cheeked and desperate, and a quiet cowboy arriving with firewood stacked on his horse, his breath fogging in the cold air as he spoke words that would change everything. "I will provide everything." And he did. They both did. Together they provided everything that mattered: love, family, security, legacy, hope. They took a moment of desperate need and transformed it into a lifetime of abundance. They proved that people could save each other, that love could grow from the smallest seed of kindness into something magnificent and enduring. The Brennan Ranch stood strong for more than 100 years after that terrible winter, passing through generation after generation. The family prospered, spreading across Wyoming and beyond, but they never forgot their origins. The story of Lucas and Beatrice, of firewood and promises and love built in a harsh winter, became family legend. It was told at weddings and gatherings, a reminder of where they came from and the values that defined them. And every winter, when the first snow fell, someone from the family would ride out to the old prospector's cabin and leave a stack of firewood beside the door. It was a tradition that started with Michael and was carried on by his children and their children after them. A reminder, a tribute, a promise kept across generations, because some promises transcend time, some acts of kindness echo forever. And some love stories, born in the coldest winter, burn bright enough to warm all the winters that follow.